Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Dana Haggard, Professor of Management and curator of this video on delegating. Delegating is a necessary task for managers, but it can also be empowering for the direct reports to whom a task is delegated. This video covers what delegating means, but also how to delegate in such a way as to help the employee feel engaged and empowered, and not just that they are taking on a task that the manager didn't want to do themselves. Let's get started. Delegating has a long history. It's been around as a leadership necessity since human beings began operating in groups. No leader can do everything themselves. According to Merriam-Webster, to delegate is to entrust something to another or to appoint as one's representative. Two basic ideas captured in these definitions is that delegation is an act of trust and that the person doing the delegating is asking the other person to represent them. In order for the delegate to be effective, the delegator has to give them authority or power to act in the delegator's place. We can see this as a definition from the freedictionary.com, to assign authority to another. These are general definitions, but a more specific and work-oriented definition is that to delegate is to give a particular job, duty, right, etc. to someone else so that they do it for you. Delegating is not something that should be taken lightly. As we see here, it involves trust and a willingness to let someone else act on your behalf. If you allow someone else to be your representative, it means they are interacting with others who will associate your delegate's actions with you. That means that the success or failure of the delegate will reflect on the delegator. To successfully delegate involves carefully considering three questions. When should you delegate? To whom and how much should you delegate? And how should you delegate, or what actions should you take? We will address each of these questions in turn. The first issue to address when delegating is when should you do it? Here are a series of questions to ask yourself before you decide to delegate a task or project. Start by asking, is the task you plan to delegate a core responsibility of your position? If so, you should only delegate the task in extreme situations. For example, performance appraisals, hiring and firing decisions, and strategic planning would all be considered core to a manager's position, and delegating those tasks to a direct report would likely be frowned upon as an abdication of duty, not only by the potential delegate, but by the manager's manager as well. If the task is not a core responsibility, then you should consider delegating it. The next question is to ask, does the direct report have the necessary information and expertise to successfully complete the task? You should only delegate a responsibility to a direct report if the answer to this is yes, or if they have the capacity to acquire the necessary information and expertise in time to successfully complete the task. Another consideration in delegating is, do you need your direct report's support or commitment for the task to be successful? If you do, then it is a good idea to consider delegation so that the delegate has a sense of ownership and contribution. The next question is one that many managers do not stop to consider. Will it expand your direct report's capabilities? Is it something that will require a mental challenge and an increase in their perspective, visibility, and skill set? In other words, will the direct report personally benefit from having completed the task? Related here is the idea that you should delegate more than just mundane or unpleasant tasks. While that might be occasionally necessary, in the long term, delegating a mix of tasks will be more effective. Do you share the same values and perspectives with the person to whom you plan to delegate? Remember that when you delegate, you are asking someone to represent you, and you are giving them the authority to act on your behalf. If you have very different ideas of how a task should be completed or what it would mean to be successful at the task, this can result in disappointment, frustration, and conflict over the outcome. This does not mean that you cannot delegate a task to someone who has different values and perspectives, but it does mean that you must make sure you agree in principle on what should be done and in general how it should be done at the beginning to avoid unpleasant surprises later. And a final consideration, do you have sufficient time to effectively engage the others? By this we mean, do you have enough time to properly outline the task and give direction, explain what is necessary to complete the task, as well as providing a satisfactory explanation for why you have delegated it to them? Also remember from one of the points above that in order to be successful, the delegate must be given enough time to complete the task and any training that might be necessary for them to complete the task. For some tasks, it might be more efficient for you to complete them yourself than to try to delegate it to someone else. However, it does take time to make time, just like it takes money to make money. If delegating will save you any time, especially if it has the potential to save you more time over time, even if it isn't much, you should still consider making the investment before you dismiss the possibility. Just be sure that you invest quality time into the delegation process and give your delegate complete instructions. After you have decided that a task can and should be delegated, the next issue is to whom and how much should you delegate? Here are 3 questions to guide in your choice. First, is the task something that can be completed by an individual, or is it something that will require a team? If time is not a crucial factor and interaction will likely generate more creativity and better solutions, then the team should be considered. However, if you have a highly skilled and reliable direct report who is capable of completing the task on their own, it might be better to delegate to that individual, especially if there are time constraints. Next, how much authority will your delegates have? Will you require them to seek your approval, or will you give them full autonomy? Will they be charged only with investigation and potential solution generation, or will they also be given the ability to make a decision and implement it? Ask yourself not only what are you comfortable with, but what will your delegates be comfortable with? An important third consideration is related to the authority the delegates will be given. Will you participate in the process, or will you leave it to their discretion? Do you plan to consult with others, either a single individual or several individuals, and then decide yourself? Or will you use a team and consult with the team, but make the decision on your own? You can let the team operate independently and come to their own decision, or you can participate as a member of the team who has a vote like everyone else. Your participation as a team member will be most effective when you have already established mutual trust and respect, so that members are not intimidated by your presence and will feel comfortable to speak freely. Whichever choice you make regarding your involvement, you need to let your direct reports know in advance what to expect. It can be an unpleasant surprise for the delegate to think they have been given full responsibility and authority, only to have their manager continue to be heavily involved. It can be equally unsettling for a delegate to think their manager will be there to provide instant feedback, and then find that their manager has left it entirely up to their direct report to make the decision. Once you have decided to delegate a task, and you have decided to whom and how much to delegate, the next question becomes what actions should you take to delegate and what should you avoid? First, be clear from the beginning about what needs to be done, why it is important, and how they will benefit from accomplishing the goal. Think back to motivation and how clear goals and expectations are necessary, as well as providing a valued outcome. Make sure you set aside sufficient time to have this conversation with the individual or meeting with the team. It is important to set boundaries and identify constraints on their actions and decisions. They need to know what rules, procedures, deadlines, and budgets they have to work within in order to accomplish the task. In providing instructions for the task, you should let them know what level of initiative they are to take regarding the timing and content of their actions. Do you want them to wait to be told what to do before acting? This is the least empowering option. Slightly better is having them ask you what to do before acting. A more empowering option is to let them know that you want them to recommend an action, and then after you have approved, take action. Even more empowering is having them act and then report the results immediately, or if they act but only report on a routine rather than an immediate basis. Each of these levels of initiative require a different level of trust. For some employees and some tasks, you might want them to wait for your detailed instructions, and for others you might be comfortable letting them have full authority to take action without checking in with you first. It depends on how often and what sorts of tasks you have delegated to them before. With increasing experience and trust should come increasing levels of initiative. When delegating, the manager must let go of the task and acknowledge that someone else is capable of completing it. To avoid frustration, a manager should recognize that demanding immediate or instant perfection is inappropriate when asking someone to take on a new task. Part of the purpose of delegating is to empower, so the manager should consider it an opportunity to teach and mentor their direct report. As any teacher will tell you, students need time to learn, and mistakes are commonly part of the process. Remember that delegating involves granting authority so that action can be taken, and the level of authority should match the level of responsibility. It makes little sense to give someone the responsibility to complete a task without giving them the authority to make decisions necessary to fulfill that responsibility. I have had personal experience with this and found it incredibly frustrating. I was given a project to manage and acted within what I considered to be my authority in order to fulfill my responsibilities. However, my boss disagreed with the decision I made and told me it was not my call to make. Needless to say, that put a strain on our relationship and made me reluctant to take on discretionary projects for him in the future. Provide adequate support and resources, including thanks and credit. In general, the person should be thanked publicly and given credit for their accomplishment. However, remember from our discussions of individual differences that some people might prefer a personal thank you note to being recognized at a company-wide meeting. Culture can also be a factor. Remember to focus accountability on results and not on methods used to achieve those results. I'm not saying you should not care about how a result was achieved. Of course you want it to be done ethically. However, you do want to give the person the freedom to decide how to achieve the goal. And remember, part of the reason you're delegating is to empower the person and to help them expand their skill sets. Check in, but don't micromanage. You want to let the person know that you are interested in how things are progressing and to let them know you are available if they need assistance, but you should not be involved to the point that you are spending just as much time and energy on the task as if you had kept it for yourself. Remember that people have different expectations regarding feedback. Some people like continual feedback, and others prefer feedback at longer intervals. Some people want frank and direct feedback, while others react better when things are softened a bit. Get to know your direct reports so that you know how often and what kind of feedback they respond to best. This can be affected by culture as well as by personality. And lastly, once the task is complete or the project finished, have a lessons learned session with your direct report. Cover not only what did they learn, but what did you learn and how can those lessons be applied in the future. Remember to include praise and encouragement along with honest, constructive feedback. And now, some questions for self-reflection. What has been your experience with managers delegating to you? What has been your experience delegating to others? What do you think is the most difficult thing to do when delegating to others? How might an individual's personality, culture, and skills affect their ability to delegate? How might a person's personality, culture, and skills affect their ability to accept delegation? That concludes this video on delegating. I hope you found the information useful and interesting. If you have any questions about topics from this video, please post them to the Student Questions discussion forum in Blackboard. Chances are, if you have a question, someone else has that question too. If you are intellectually curious and would like to learn more, please stay tuned for the sources and additional resources links for this video. Thanks for watching.